The last one. Spirit Wolf never liked his name, not as much as his full human name, which he chose to be Matthew. His father said that wasn't important. It had to be descriptive, and it was just between them. He would stalk spirits, which made Matthew wish he'd been named Spirit Stalker for many years. His father understood but did not agree. A wolf is patient and cruel, but does not stalk like a cat. And you are not heartless like a cat. His father had always given him his real food, that is, the kind he got when his father laid a hand on his forehead. The warm glow of real food rejuvenated him. They ate human food as well, steaks and fish and vegetables. These fed the body. His father was clear with him. Human food would keep him alive for 70 or 80 years. Real food would keep him alive forever, nearly forever. At 25, Matthew was coming time to leave. It would have to be by 30. You will be the last one. His father wasn't sure of that, but looked in Matthew's eyes deeply. Matthew must be free from questions. Matthew had learned to hunt 5 years before. He was a slow learner and resistant to training. As a small child, he only knew that his father came back with the power, the real food, about every 2 months, perhaps 3, and he would share it with him and his mother, Spirit Grower. With time, his father would hint at where the food came from. They lived on the fringes of man's settlement, never there long enough to become known, always able to hide and escape. With his father and mother, he learned all he would need to live in the world, and that included the earthly things, reading and writing and math. They met the townsfolk's demands with homeschool of sorts, but only to avoid their authority. But his most important task came slowly to Matthew. He did not want to accept where the energy came from. Matthew's father had allowed him to have friends, and Matthew did not like that they could someday be victims. They need never be, his father, Spirit Sower, would say. They can come and go in peace. But what about my brothers? Matthew would object. They might kill my friends. There are many people on this earth. Your brothers will never find them. But they might. And as we multiply, will we not begin to outnumber mankind and eat all his spirits? No, Spirit Wolf. Let me tell you why we are what we are. I was of the first in these Rocky Mountains. I was a murderer of flesh and blood, as I have said, and I fled society. But I had my Susan with me, and we came here. In those days, a man could disappear. He would leave and keep walking until there was no trace of him. Like Odysseus, who traveled inland with an oar over his shoulder until no one even recognized what an oar was. You remember the story. When my first life as a man was over, we traveled west until no man had seen my skin or heard of our kind. That was a long time ago. Yes. I don't know how many years anymore. It is 11 suns like you ago. We moved west with the years to stay ahead of men. But you were a man then. Matthew knew these parts of the story, and he knew what his father would say. They always said the same things as he told the same stories. Yes, I was a man, but they would kill me if they found me. I hunted and trapped, and we moved and moved again. But one day, when the white man caught up to us, no one remembered us. Everyone we had known was long dead, and we were able to prosper. But weren't you old? How could you still be alive? His father smiled. You ask good questions. Matthew shook his head in confusion. Why did I never ask you this before? You didn't think to ask because of how I told the story. Matthew's face reddened. Don't blush, just listen. And now his father began to tell him new things. The Shining Men. 10 years after we left, I was on a ledge on a mountain, thinking, when Susan came up there to bring me food. I think you were fighting, and you went there to calm down, and she came to you with dinner so you would make up. See, Spirit Wolf? You see the questions to ask when you have the right information. It's true. We lay there watching the stars and saying sorry with our silence, when one of the stars slowly descended. It got bigger and bigger as it got lower, and it came to hover over us. It was silent, but we were filled with awe and fear. I thought it was Jesus there to punish me for my sin. But it wasn't? No. There were shining men who came out and spoke to us. Aliens. You call them that because there is so much talk of aliens now. I wouldn't have said that at the time. To me, they were small, shining men. Did they say anything? They spoke and listened for a long time, and then they said they could have us live forever. We would just have to learn something. It was something that would defy God. This made me think they were devils or fallen angels. What was it they wanted you to learn? To take the souls of other people. And you said yes. Not right away. Susan and I spoke, and we agreed. Hell was already my destiny because of my murder. Maybe I would avoid it this way. We said yes. Why did she say yes? They would not do it just for me, but also she was tempted. What did they teach you? They took us into their shining light. I can't tell you what they did. They showed me somehow through their thoughts, just as I have to show you how. I can't tell you. You have to feel it. Matthew stepped back. Then they let you go? They left us outside their light. We would both have to find souls and partake of them. When? We did that a long time later. And nothing can ever kill you? Not exactly. Let me finish. First, they told us we would raise one son after another. Each would take 30 years to raise. Then he would go his own way and live as we did. What if they didn't want to? They would die. Did you want that life? No. Then why didn't you change your mind? It was too late. They had already told us the secret. They tricked you? Somewhat. But I told you we were tempted. We let ourselves be tricked. You said only she was tempted. I could have gone to hell and taken my punishment. She would have been free. Matthew stared into his father's eyes for a long time. If his father had chosen different, he wouldn't be alive. His mother would not have lived as long as she did. His father laughed and put his arm around Matthew, nudging him to walk alongside him. His demeanor changed, and he smiled easily, the way he did when talking to normal people. The moral is, always read the fine print before you sign anything. Ha ha ha, father, not funny, said Matthew, twisting roughly out of his father's embrace. You are making a joke, so I'll forget to ask more questions, but not this time. Answer this. Can anything ever kill us? With enough violence, yes, we can die. But you will never die of disease or old age. What if I never take a soul? You would suffer and die. You said I could live 80 years with human food. It's possible. Starving without human food only takes a few weeks, but you can go without real food for many years. You would have 15 years of suffering like you were starving every day. Then the hunger would go away, but you would be weak. Your face would be ashen and gaunt, and your voice would be raspy. Everyone would fear you. Matthew was quiet. He felt he could do it. But then he thought of 15 years of suffering, more than half his life to that point, and he knew he couldn't. Are we human? Yes, we are. But we are also something else. You can't know until you have taken a soul. Then a thought ripped into Matthew. Was Mom killed by violence? I can't hide it from you. Yes. There was a town that got suspicious because we never grew older. We should have moved sooner. They came to kill us. That day I was far away hunting, but they found her and hanged her. But she didn't die, so they burned her, and then they cut her to pieces. I found her buried when I returned. I still felt her suffering, and I could hear her story, the way she died. Oh God. Please don't say that. You were too young to remember any of this. You don't remember that she hid you in the house and it burned around you? I found you crawling in the ashes. You were burned all over, but I gave you real food and you healed. I don't remember anything. But there is still more to say. You had an older brother who was still with us. He was about 15 and was learning how to take souls. But he ran away during the attack, and I've never seen him since. He must have wasted away somewhere in society. Matthew was amazed his brother was learning to take souls at 15. Matthew was 25 and still had not learned. What was his name? Grapple. But why did you have two sons at once? The shining men control everything. We don't see them, but they are there. Grapple was violent, very violent. I was worried that he would not be able to keep our secret. I think they thought so too, and so they had your mother have another boy. But I still don't know why they killed her. Maybe they couldn't control the mob. Maybe. If they couldn't keep him from being violent or keep the people away from your mother, maybe they are not as powerful as I think. Where did she hide me? You were in the chimney. I don't know why you didn't cry. You must have sensed the people's intentions. You were 4, so you could think. Do you really remember nothing of that? Matthew knit his brow and thought. Nothing. But you remember your mother. Matthew looked at the ground, then back to his father's eyes. Why did you always have boys? I don't know. But I can't have another child without her, so the shining men will abandon us. You will be the last one. Your brothers can't have sons either, not unless the shining men grant the power to another woman. And it's beyond knowing if they will or will not, or if they have already. And so, I think we will not multiply, and your friends are safe. He started to laugh and put his arm around Matthew again to walk away. But we might. We might. Matthew slowly remembered that when he was 15, he actually had asked his father about his age. How could he have had so many sons and not be an old man? And his father answered in a long story, and Matthew forgot he had ever asked. He marveled that to his father, time must seem like many circles that come together. A conversation makes part of a circle, and with time, the circle completes, and a new circle forms outside the last. It is made of conversations and thoughts and hopes and souls and days. To go back to an old conversation is to take just a few steps in. 10 years is not such a long pause. Plucking the beautiful flowers. Spirit Sower had demonstrated to Matthew how to take souls, but not conveyed the knowledge. He preferred large wooded areas, places where people could easily go missing and not be found for years. They would hike up and down trails for days, seeking out likely victims. Finally, they would find one that was separated from the group, and his father would get to within 30 yards or so, and then thrust his palm out toward them, and an invisible energy would strike them dead. Sometimes the person felt that something was about to happen. Either they would sense the power, or, more likely, they would get an eldritch feeling when all the noise in the forest stopped. No breeze, no chirping, not even the sound of insects, for gathering the power stopped all things and frightened every living being. They would thud forward and fall, and the person's spirit would enter his father. If their body was found, the cause of death would be mysterious. There would be no injuries. There would be no drowning, no signs of hypothermia. Nothing other than ceasing to live. Sometimes they would be knocked out of their shoes. They would make haste to leave, and his father had one other ability he had yet to teach Spirit Wolf. He could light walk, which meant he could walk right over leaves and foliage without disturbing them, and it was fast. He would carry Matthew, and sometimes he would also carry the victim far away to inexplicable places. At times, he would use light walking to sneak up on their victims. Matthew was horrified in his mind, but he felt a quickening of delight in his heart. It was godlike to know of power held secret from most men. One day, it was time for Spirit Wolf to make his first strike. They followed a group of hikers for hours, always just out of sight, and sometimes one of them would separate from the group to pee. They stopped for lunch, and a young woman went into the trees searching for flowers. She went out of sight of her group, and then she stopped to listen for the sounds that had gone away. Suddenly, she jogged off to a clearing where she plucked wildflowers that strained for the sun. The sounds returned, and father and son approached her again. They stood shoulder to shoulder so Spirit Sower could convey the knowledge of projecting power. It couldn't be done in words. Matthew understood without them. It was best if the victim was standing upright, but she kept bending to pick up the flowers. Then she stood and turned, looking for her way back. She could not tell which way to go and kept looking in different directions. Matthew raised his arm and stared. He felt the power gather, but he hesitated. She saw them and she waved. They had to wave back. Spirit Sower said, using his demeanor for men, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you lost?" "Just looking for my camp." "I think we saw a camp back that way." "Yes, that's right. Thank you. No problem." She was slightly nervous and said, "What are you doing out here?" "Looking for flowers, just like you," said Matthew's father. "It's a good clearing." "Yes, well, be seeing you." They walked on in silence. Matthew's head was bowed. His father said nothing, not right away. 3 Conquests. On these trips, they preferred to sleep in houses and cabins if they were empty. Otherwise, they would use hunting lodges. They did that for comfort, not survival, because they could sleep anywhere and in any weather and not be harmed by it. They hadn't found any good victims the last 2 days, and they would return soon, even if it was empty-handed. Matthew thought his father may have forgotten his failure, but he had not. "You know the old cliché," said his father. Matthew knew exactly what he meant. They had seen movies where a father took his son out to hunt and wanted him to shoot his first deer. The son would either fail to shoot, deliberately miss, or miss because his hands were shaking. That would show his sensitivity. They joked about that together because the movies lied. Usually a son is eager to get his first kill, to overcome his emotions and join his father as a hunter. But here, on Matthew's first hunt, he had stood and couldn't strike. Matthew's father could not have used heavier words. Spirit Wolf felt as if he had been struck like one of their victims. "But that was a person," he said, "not an animal. Son, we live on them. For us, that is a fact of life. A cow lives 15 years, and people feed on them. People live 80. We live forever. But this isn't natural. It was made up for us by the shining men. God, Mother Nature, whatever, made the rules for man. The shining people only gave us more rules. There's no use questioning it. It's our way, and it may be that the angels and the shining men come from the same place." They found no one on that trip, and for many days Matthew suffered the silence of his father. His father went away for a few hours and found a soul himself, and did not share it. They returned home for a few weeks, and the hunger began to rise in Matthew. They went again. This time, a man fell behind his group by just a few seconds. Matthew did not hesitate. He raised his hand and struck, and he went to the body, whose face stared blankly to the sky. He took the soul and felt it replenish the starving cells of his body. He waited for his father to pick him up, but he was light-walking away already. Without thinking, Matthew followed and found that he was light-walking too. The moment the man's soul had entered him, he had known how to do it. It was like thought itself. But when they returned home, Matthew had become angry. He told his father he would take no more spirit energy. He would eat normal food and die at a normal age. Matthew held out almost 11 months. His father remained strong, but with Matthew, the weakness, the hunger, the pain in every muscle and every joint, the headaches, the foggy thinking, the irritability, the feeling of hollowness, all conspired to force him into taking his next victim, a lone hiker who was going back to his car to get something. And the energy that flowed through his body was more than a warmth. It was an elixir, an ecstasy of relief and gratefulness. Matthew relinquished the dream of his perfect self and closed his thoughts upon living his own life his way. He understood he had wanted to be normal, a man like other men. Now his life would be his normal life, even if it was strange to earthly men, even if it was wrong. He understood that he had not known who had chosen his life for him, his father, his mother, or the Shining Men. But now he chose it for himself. He consoled himself that he could undo the choice at any time. He had years and ages to decide to renounce his path. Perhaps one day he would have the strength and stay resolute. Perhaps one day he would weary of life and suffer his 15 years. Until then, he would not die silent and anonymous for the sake of the victims that crowded the land. He banished thoughts of mercy and regret and fixed his eyes upon the horizon. As his 30th birthday approached, he knew he had learned what he needed from his father. It was fall, and he split wood with his father day after day, gathering the courage to talk to him. He would never see his father again. He asked his father, "Where did my brothers go?" "You must not meet them. They would have ruined your growth when you were young, and it is lucky that Grapple disappeared. When each other one took his leave, I told them to stay away. But I knew once each one was gone, he would never come back. Neither will you. Like a tiger, you will not want to return. You will not want to come back to the womb." "Do you mean home?" asked Matthew. "No. You cannot go back to the womb as a child. When you are a man, your home is like the womb. It is impossible to return." He cast his eyes down when he said womb. "And seeing your brothers would be dangerous, it makes it easier to find us if you cross paths. No one can stay perfectly hidden. One can only be careful." "Yes, Father." They split wood for a few minutes, the forest growing silent. Only the sound of splinters filled the air. Matthew was ready. He went around and stood in front of his father. Spirit Sower put down the axe and stood tall. Matthew said, "I am Spirit Wolf. Goodbye, Spirit Sower." "Goodbye, Spirit Wolf." And so they parted.